Season 1 of Fallout takes place more than 200 years after the Great War resulted in a nuclear holocaust that decimated the Earth. Many groups of surviving humans have lived in the centuries since inside idyllic underground vaults created by a company known as Vault-Tec. Inside Vault 33, the headstrong Lucy MacLean lives with her younger brother Norm and their father Hank, Vault 33's overseer. Lucy is excited to take part in an arranged marriage with a resident of the neighboring Vault 32 named Monty. But during the wedding reception, the visitors from Vault 32 begin mercilessly slaughtering the residents of Vault 33. Lucy realizes that Monty and his allies are actually raiders from the surface, who pillage Vault 32 before moving on to her home next. Hank saves Lucy by killing the villainous Monty before being captured by the raiders' leader, Lee Moldaver. As the raiders flee, Lucy resolves to leave her vault to rescue her father, venturing out into the dangerous outside wasteland for the first time in her life. One of the most powerful presences in the wasteland is the Enclave, a fascist faction founded by surviving members of the American government. When Dr. Siggi Wilzig perfects cold fusion technology, which could generate near limitless power, he flees the Enclave with the technology and his trusty canine companion CX-404. Meanwhile, the quasi-religious military order known as the Brotherhood of Steel begin training new recruits to advance their cause of finding and preserving pre-war technology. One of those recruits is Maximus, who becomes jealous when his friend Dane is selected to become the squire of Knight Titus. But when Dane is injured after sabotaging their own boot to avoid the pressures of becoming a squire, Maximus is selected as their replacement, accompanying Titus to track down Wilzig and return the cold fusion research to the Enclave. During their mission, Titus is mauled by a mutated bear and demands that Maximus help to heal his grave injuries. But Maximus has grown tired of the contempt with which Titus treats him and instead allows the knight to die and steal his T-60 power armor for himself. Elsewhere, a trio of bounty hunters dig up the body of the Ghoul, who was buried alive as punishment for betraying a ruthless gang leader. Ghouls are humans who have been mutated by the radiation of the nuclear blast, extending their lifespans and making them nearly immortal. The bounty hunters want the Ghoul's help in capturing Wilzig to collect his bounty, but instead, the Ghoul kills them all to claim the riches for himself. As Wilzig and CX-404 evade capture, they arrive in a settlement known as Philly, where they come across the wide-eyed Lucy, hoping to find clues for where her father has been taken. Unfortunately, the Ghoul also arrives in Philly and attempts to apprehend Wilzig, shooting anyone who stands in his way. Wilzig's foot is shot off and CX-404 is injured while trying to protect his master, while Lucy selflessly joins the fight against the villainous Ghoul. Maximus arrives in Philly and fights the Ghoul, though his inexperience piloting the power armor leads to his defeat. When Lucy discovers that Wilzig is taking his cold fusion technology to Moldaver and her new California Republic, she decides to accompany him in the hopes of finding her father. Unfortunately, Wilzig's injury ruins their escape, and so he places the cold fusion technology inside his head and accepts his death, tasking Lucy to transport his head to Moldaver on her own. The Ghoul heals the injured CX-404 and nicknames it Dog Meat, using his new companion to track Wilzig's scent. They confront Lucy, who loses Wilzig's head after it's eaten by a mutated creature known as a Gulper. As Lucy fights the Ghoul, she shatters his supply of chems, drugs that keep him sane instead of turning feral like so many other ghouls. Furious, the Ghoul is forced to abandon his mission for Wilzig's head, instead kidnapping Lucy and going off in search of more chems. When Lucy tries to escape the Ghoul and bites off his finger, he retaliates by cutting off one of hers. The Ghoul takes Lucy to a Mr. Handy robot named Snip, trading her for a new supply of chems. Snip replaces Lucy's missing finger before trying to harvest her organs. Instead, Lucy fights back, disabling Snip and escaping. As Lucy flees, she discovers that the Ghoul has collapsed from withdrawals before being able to take his chems. And so, Lucy shows her captor mercy by giving him the chems to save his life. Elsewhere inside his power armor, Maximus assumes the identity of Titus and tasks the Brotherhood with sending him a new squire. That squire, Thaddeus, had relentlessly bullied Maximus in training, and so Maximus takes advantage of his new power position to torture his new squire. But soon Maximus realizes that Thaddeus is a good-intentioned fool who bullied out of his own lack of confidence, helping the two bond despite Thaddeus still believing that Maximus is Titus. Thaddeus. Maximus and Thaddeus then come across the Gulper, securing Wilzig's head by chance. As the duo continue to bond, Maximus finally decides to reveal his true identity. Furious over this betrayal, Thaddeus threatens to turn over Maximus to the Brotherhood. Maximus attacks Thaddeus, crushing his foot, but Thaddeus manages to steal the power armor's fusion core, trapping Maximus inside it, then flees with Dogmeat and Wilzig's head. Lucy finds Maximus and frees him from his armor, and the pair decide to align to retrieve the head together. Along their journey, the pair forge a connection, with Maximus revealing the death of his parents during the destruction of a settlement known as Shady Sands, while Lucy denounces the Vault Overseers for lying about life in the wasteland to stoke fear and subservience within the Vault dwellers. When Maximus is injured during a confrontation with a pair of cannibals, Lucy takes him to seek medical treatment at a nearby vault, which has a thriving and overly optimistic community, including survivors of Shady Sands. While Maximus is immediately won over by the vault's luxuries, Lucy becomes suspicious, discovering the dwellers ritualistically worship Moldaver as their flame mother, and also experiment on their own inhabitants. Lucy and Maximus are kicked out of Vault 4, much to Maximus's disappointment, but Lucy proclaims that he can come to live with her in Vault 33 upon the completion of their quest. Meanwhile, the injured Thaddeus comes across a snake oil salesman who sells him a concoction that heals his broken foot immediately. As Thaddeus finally reaches a radio to contact the Brotherhood, he's confronted by Maximus and Lucy. During their fight, Thaddeus is shot through the neck, but miraculously lives, leading Maximus to deduce that the snake oil salesman's concoction has turned Thaddeus into a ghoul. As the Brotherhood approach, Thaddeus realizes he will no longer be accepted amongst their ranks, and so he gives Wilzig's head to Lucy and flees. Maximus parts ways with Lucy with a kiss, then stays behind to distract the Brotherhood as she escapes. Back inside Vault 33, an election is held that names Betty Pearson the new overseer. Norm MacLean grows more suspicious about Vault 32 and heads off with his cousin Chet to investigate. Inside Vault 32, Norm realizes the residents weren't killed by the raiders, but had instead killed each other years prior during a rebellion against Vault Tech's leadership. Norm is also shocked to discover that the raiders had gained access to the vault by using a Pip-Boy device belonging to his long-dead mother, Rose. To further investigate, Norm poses as Betty and is granted access to the mysterious Vault 31, where he learns that all of the past overseers of Vaults 32 and 33, including Hank and Betty, had been executives at Vault Tech before the Great War, cryogenically frozen until being woken up to serve as overseers to keep the dwellers in line. A pre-war Vault Tech executive, Bud Askins, has had his brain placed inside a robot to oversee the success of this operation, and to ensure that Norm can't warn his friends about these revelations, Bud locks Norm inside Vault 31, giving him the choice of being cryogenically frozen or to starve to death. Meanwhile, as the Ghoul recovers, he discovers a bounty poster for Moldaver and recognizes her from his past. Centuries prior, before the Great War left the world an apocalyptic wasteland, the Ghoul lived as a man named Cooper Howard, a once highly regarded star of Western movies whose career had grown stagnant. And so Cooper's wife Barb helped him get a job as a spokesperson for the company in which she was a high-ranking executive, Vault Tech. But as Cooper worked closely with Vault Tech, he grew disillusioned by their business practices of selling residential spaces inside underground vaults with forced conformity by fear-mongering and the threat of an apocalyptic event. Despite Cooper's own public reputation taking a hit due to his association with Vault Tech, the company itself continued to thrive, thanks in part to sleazy executives like Bud Askins. As Cooper contemplated cutting ties with Vault Tech, his wife Barb remained staunch in her loyalty, explaining that her position in the company guaranteed their family's position in a special executive vault should doomsday occur. His marriage crumbling, Cooper began attending meetings with anti-Vault Tech radicals, led by Moldaver, a nuclear scientist whose research into cold fusion was stolen by Vault Tech. Moldaver warned Cooper about the duplicitousness of his wife's work, and gave him a listening device to use on Barb to secretly gather evidence of Vault Tech's true plans. With this device, Cooper learned that Vault Tech planned on using each of their vaults to run different social experiments on their residents descendants in the hopes of creating a perfect society that they could control. And to ensure the necessity of the vaults, Barb suggested that Vault Tech itself be responsible for starting a nuclear war. Cooper was shocked and disgusted by his wife's actions and fled Vault Tech's headquarters, bumping into Barb's assistant on his way out, who just so happened to be a young Hank MacLean. Cooper then divorced his wife, leaving him financially and professionally ruined while fighting for custody of his daughter Janie. As Vault Tech initiated the Great War, nuclear bombs detonated in Los Angeles, prompting Cooper to flee with Janie in the hopes of getting her to safety. Now, 200 years later, Cooper has turned into the ruthless Ghoul, and the revelation that Moldaver is also still alive inspires him to seek out answers to the whereabouts of his long-missing family. As this season comes to a close, Maximus faces punishment from the Brotherhood for failing to acquire Wilzig's head, and is forced to lead the Knights to Moldaver or else suffer severe consequences. Lucy reaches Moldaver's new California Republic base at the Griffith Observatory, finding her father Hank locked inside a cage. Moldaver reveals to Lucy that years ago her mother Rose had discovered that civilization was returning to the surface, but Hank had been installed as overseer to ensure everyone stayed inside the vault, and so he demanded his wife stay put. Instead, Rose fled the vault with her young children Lucy and Norm, and found refuge alongside Moldaver in Shady Sands. Hank tracked down his family, blowing up Shady Sands and leaving his wife Rose to turn into a feral ghoul, while he returned to Vault 33 with his children. Moldaver then reveals that she had kidnapped Hank because the cold fusion technology, which could bring power and security to so many helpless people in the wasteland, can only be activated by a Vault Tech employee. Lucy is devastated by the revelations of her father's sinister nature and begs him to activate the cold fusion to grant power to the wasteland. As Hank complies with his daughter's wishes, the Brotherhood arrives to steal the cold fusion technology for themselves, while the Ghoul arrives and fights his way through the Knights to reach Hank, demanding to know where Vault Tech is keeping his family. Hank refuses to answer, instead stealing power armor from a fallen knight and fleeing. Lucy chooses to put her feral mother Rose out of her misery and accompany the Ghoul and Dogmeat on their quest to find Hank. Meanwhile, Moldaver succumbs to injuries she sustained in the battle, but not before successfully restoring power to all of Los Angeles. The Brotherhood find Maximus standing over Moldaver's body, and believing him to be responsible, hail him as a hero and proclaim him an official knight. In the end, Hank flees the conflict and arrives in the city of New Vegas.